You know, everybody knows the Beniverse, but today everyone will know my truth when we talk Halloween 6, The Curse of Michael Myers. Why is that like maybe the worst tagline I've ever heard? That just like sounds like somebody who's been accused of a crime and he's like, this is my truth.
Well, it kind of fits this movie.
Yeah. This
Ah,
is this
great.
is a guy who's been accused of horrible stuff, and then they're just like, this is him like tweeting something out where he titles it "My Truth," with like 4 pages that he screenshotted on his phone that he wrote on his notes app.
My struggle, if you will.
No, not my struggle. Are you suggesting the Michael Myers ties to Nazism? If the shoe fits,
If the shoe fits.
if the shoe fits. Well, I mean, we know there's one place that Michael Myers would not be, and that's hell, because obviously hell
Hell.
would not
Hell.
take him. But I guess we're on a different movie now, so I will just have to let that joke die gracefully, as Michael Myers cannot. And we're talking the movie today, Halloween, The Curse of Michael Myers, which is the sixth installment in the Halloween series. And this is like the final part, installment, whatever you want to call it, of the original trilogy. This is one of the considered original six that then will then get rebooted to only be two, which will then get rebooted to only be one. It's canonical. So there's a lot to it. But as of right now, Halloween 6 does still tie into the first 1978 John Carpenter film. This is the sixth installment. This is where we learn Michael Myers' truth, who he is, what he is about, and also just how bad directing can be involved in this movie. Uh, Listen, this film's infamous. It is just straight up infamous. Let me, before we even get into it, because I'm about to jump into it, let me just introduce my co-host for today. Is roommate Tris. You're
You've seen
on.
me 6 times already.
I just want to point out that I know you waved. We are an audio podcast.
Oh, we're not actually doing visuals?
We're doing visuals still, but I mean, there's a good chunk of the audience who will only listen to audio.
Okay, but I waved for the few who are going to be watching this on YouTube then.
Okay, fair. So thank you for waving to our audience, and if you will, could you acknowledge our audio audience?
Hello, audio audience.
Perfect. Now they know who you are. Now they feel your presence, and now I have just spent 10 seconds of a show uh, giving direction. So that's fun. Listen, good lord, I'm gonna cut that whole aspect out. Sorry, give me a second. I just lost my train of thought. I'm still waking up.
You're okay. I'm just looking up who the director is. Joe
I
Chappelle.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. So I'll cut giving a thumbs up right here. Yeah. So roommate Tris, we're talking about Halloween, The Curse of Michael Myers. This is an infamous movie. This is, weirdly enough, this feels like a very modern film because it has many of the modern film struggles that you hear about. This is a film that famously tested poorly with its audiences upon its original release. It then gets workshopped. There's a bunch of different prints. There's alternative footage. There's a completely different ending that's shot. Uh,
An actor
that
dies.
yeah, the it was discovered by fans of the series, and this film kind of gets reclaimed by fans of the series who crave this thing known as the producer's cut, which developed this cult following. No one really knew what it was. No one knew how to find it. It's, is this exist? Does this exist? Very much shades of, I guess you would call, the Snyder cut in
Hmm.
2022 parables. But eventually, what ends up happening is in 2014, the producer's cut is officially released on Blu-ray. Show it up proudly for our audience, for you.
Our YouTube audience.
Yeah, for this is only for the YouTube audience, but for those who are not listening, Tris is holding up the. Can you hold that up again, because I can see it? Because I actually don't think I've seen it. So it's called the unrated producer's cut, and
Hmm.
this is basically how the film was made to be seen before test audiences came in and before a studio destroyed any creativity in this film. This is a film that comes out in 1995. It marks the last appearance of Donald Pleasance in the role as Dr. Loomis. He dies before the film is released. Uh, Watching the film, you can tell that he's really sick. You can tell that
Hmm.
he's not doing so well. And then this film gets released on September 29th, 1995, grosses $15 million dollars on a $5 million budget. So these films still gross their money, but they're not maybe as culturally impactful as they were. Comes out to horrible, horrible reviews, which ends up getting the franchise rebooted in 1998 with Halloween H2O 20 years later, which that film decides to take everything from movie 3 to movie 6 and just make it completely non-canon anymore. So only Halloween 1 and 2 matter. So this is, like I said, this is the last installment within this series of the Halloween franchise. It continues on with the story that we see in Halloween 5, The Revenge of Michael Myers, with this character known as the Man in Black coming back. And it starts from there. And this this film was originally pitched as an origins film, and you can kind of understand why, because essentially we are watching the origins of Michael Myers. Even if we don't see him young, it's exploring who and why Michael Myers is the way he is. Again, this film ends up getting seen by Miramax, which can you hold up the other case, Tris?
This is
So
a
I
collection, but
Yes.
yeah.
So the reason I'm having him hold it up is this is the Halloween collection. It's the Miramax Classics, as they call it. There's 3 films that are in this, and for anyone who's buying Halloween now, this is probably most famously the copy that you will own. This will have Halloween 6 on it. This will have H2O, and this will have Halloween Resurrections. Even though Halloween 6 has nothing to do with H2O or Resurrections. They're completely different storylines in canon. Uh, this is when Miramax has the rights to the Halloween franchise. They're bought by the Weinstein brothers in the, I want to say like 92 or 93, because I think Weinstein becomes like a name in like 1992 and 93. So these ends up being one of the films that Harvey Weinstein ends up producing in this. So this is why you buy these as the Miramax collection. It's really interesting to see just the effect that Miramax has on these films, and specifically Harvey Weinstein's role in the series, going through this film to Rob Zombie's Halloween 2. And when we talk about the Rob Zombies films, there's going to be a lot of oral history that has been written about Rob Zombie and Harvey Weinstein's clashes on set. In this case, this sounds like it's a little bit more on the producer side of the film, where it is, he doesn't seem to be, I couldn't find any like crazy antidotes or anything really connecting Weinstein to the behind the scenes trouble of this film. This film, Halloween, The Curse of Michael Myers, is directed by a fellow named Joe Chappelle. Sorry, Chappelle. Joe Chappelle. And it is written by Daniel Ferrans, who I just wanted to double check. I had a feeling it was going to be this. Get ready for his filmography, Tris. Can you name
Okay.
another film that he's written?
No.
Okay, I got a few for you. You got The Tooth Fairy from 2006 with
With Dwayne The Rock Johnson?
no, shockingly no, it's actually a horror film about the Tooth Fairy in 2006. So that's a movie that he directed. I thought it was the Dwayne The Rock Johnson. And then you have the movie The Girl Next Door, which is another horror film. And then let's see what else. You have a few other ones. He's provides interviews for the Friday the 13th documentary. And then, oh God, he's the guy that did The Haunting of Sharon Tate and The Murders of Nicole Brown movies from like 2 years ago. Jeez.
Oof.
This guy maybe doesn't have the most acclaimed run of films, and let's just start off with this, Tris. What are your overall thoughts when we talk Halloween, The Curse of Michael Myers? Not like getting into the film, but when you think of Halloween, The Curse of Michael Myers, what do you think?
Are we talking theatrical right now?
Let's keep it theatrical and we'll jump into producers as it goes. But again, your relationship with this film might be more on the producer side.
Uh, when I think of the theatrical, I think it's a unmitigated mess.
Yeah.
Like it's so incoherent. Um, Granted, I don't really like the producer's cut that much more, but at least the producer's cut is a coherent movie,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just a shame that when they went to change this movie, that Pleasance had already passed away, and so a large part of the reason the theatrical is so incoherent is because they had to work around the fact that Donald Pleasance was no longer um,
With
with us.
us, yeah.
Yeah,
It's when you watch this film, I already alluded to it earlier. Pleasance looks in bad health
yeah,
throughout this film. I mean, like, especially in the theatrical cut, you can tell he's even struggling just to move. The action scenes are very much reduced in this film. He never comes face to face with Myers in this film in either version, which is just like when you think of the character
hmm.
of Dr. Loomis, to have him never interacting with Michael is a very odd decision. But there's probably because there's either not even stunt works, but just more engagement that with a guy who makes it to his age. He ends up dying at the age of 75, so a little bit younger of a death. This is like, and like I said, by the end, you can really feel his, I don't even want to say presence fading, but it is just somebody who you're watching, and it's kind of painful to watch him act in this movie because you can just tell he's not
Yeah.
himself even fully anymore. He ends up dying of a heart attack in February of 1995. This film gets released in September of 1995. What's interesting is you talked about it, how you prefer the producer's cut. What I find so interesting about producers' cuts, directors' editions, whatever you want to call them, is that often the DNA is still the same within the films. The same general constructs exist within the films. If you don't like one story, it's not that you might not like the other version, but a lot of people will sometimes think like, oh, the director's cut is like a different movie from beginning to end, instead of just large radical changes that are made. In this case, for the producer's cut, this is large radical changes that happen a few scenes within the movie. So they changed the narrative focus of this movie, but it's not like the general story itself changes. This is not like you're going to watch from minute 1 to minute 87 and be like, that is one entire different movie of different shots, of different directing, different
Uh,
writing.
I will say the ending is completely different.
The ending is, like I said, that's one of those scenes where it is like a completely different film. And
Yeah.
that's what the producer's cut is. It is scenes intertwined within the story that allow it to get to a different conclusion. And that's what it is. And it's kind of the same way with just the Justice League cut. That film, the 4 hour Snyder cut, that's just an extension of what we saw in Joss Whedon. The DNA, the general storyline is still the same. It ends very differently than how Josh Whedon's version gets there, but a lot of the same work and character setup is still there. Now they're just kind of getting to do it in full. Did you buy the producer's cut when it came out, or did you get it years later?
Oh, I think I bought it in 2016
Okay, so
because I didn't know that the Blu-ray even existed.
was this something you were aware of while watching Halloween 6 for the first time? That there was this alleged like producer's cut, that there was this bootleg DVD going around?
The first time I watched Halloween 6, I was a kid and we didn't have the internet, so no. However, when we first got the internet and I was starting to really get into these movies, um, as like a preteen young adult, um, that's when I discovered, oh, there's a producer's cut that is completely different and has favorite one of my favorite characters, Jamie, in it for just a little bit more. So that's what interested me about the producer's cut was I think they kind of do her really dirty in the theatrical cut.
Mm,
Not that they don't do not also do her dirty in the producer's cut, but she survives a little under.
yeah. No,
But
uh,
that's basically my journey with the producer's cut.
yeah. The the producer's cut is something that I was aware of when we're talking in the context of Halloween. Now, these are movies that I haven't necessarily sought out all the time to rewatch, and specifically Curse of Michael Myers was one that I didn't really sought go out of my way to watch. So I learned about this while doing more of my research that there was this cut that was really infamous for just essentially being a better film. But I think what's so interesting about this is usually when I'm doing the research for this show, I find tidbits on some interesting news that I expand on. This one has a lot because this film comes out in a really important time for Hollywood's history. This comes out between 1990 and 1995. I believe 1990 is when Halloween 5 comes out, Halloween 6 is 1995. Hollywood has just completely shifted within those 5 years in filmmaking. Filmmaking really takes a shift when the indie movement of like 1992 to 94 takes over. That's when you get directors like Kevin Smith, like Robert Rodriguez, like Quentin Tarantino coming up and making their films, making it on a way cheaper budget, and they're lauded as kind of the next saviors of Hollywood to many degrees. So by the time we've had this film, Tarantino has gone on to make Reservoir Dogs and Pulp Fiction, and he starts getting the same thing that we see in the 21st century. When a director gets early success in their career, the studios want to work with them, and the big budget movies want to work with them. Let's get somebody like this to be brought onto this project and make Halloween 6 for them. So, by all accounts, this film early on, because remember, this is a Miramax film, which is Harvey Weinstein, which, of course, Harvey Weinstein produces basically all of Tarantino's work up until Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, post his crimes being revealed. But this is a film that through Miramax, they decide, let's get somebody who we like. And Quentin Tarantino wrote by all accounts, an original script for this film in about 1992-93. He writes a script known as, and I don't want to say exactly what the title was. I think it's Halloween 666, The Origin,
Mm-hmm.
something along those lines. I don't remember if that's his title or somebody else's. But basically, the project that Tarantino pitched, and this is a little unconfirmed. This is where we're going into is this the idea? Is this not the idea? What is his actual involvement? What was his idea? But the planned script involved Michael Myers and the Man in Black fleeing Haddonfield together and going on a road trip down Route 66 while murdering people. That's the original pitch for this movie. You can very much see Tarantino's style in that. That's largely based on, if this is all to be believed, this is really heavily based on Natural Born Killers, a movie that Oliver Stone directs, that Quentin Tarantino writes, that ends up getting the script completely changed, that to the point that Tarantino has disowned that movie, saying that is not his vision. But you can see why that type of would interest Tarantino.
Mm-hmm.
At one point, John Carpenter is asked to return to direct. There's an urban legend that there was supposed to be a space station in this film involving Michael Myers in space, where they're really now just doing the Jason Voorhees route of it. There's other concepts that have been discussed that, again, and I can't do the full validity of these because I'm not positive of them, but there's stuff like Michael being found by Dr. Loomis's son, or Michael's mother being kept as a sex slave by the man in black. There's a lot of these ideas that are just going around at the time, and there's different filmmakers getting lauded to make this film. The most interesting one, I think, of course, is Tarantino. That's a very radically different film if Tarantino directs this. One, it's probably good. I think that's probably the hugest difference between Halloween 6 if Tarantino directs it. It's a, at the very least, a much more engaging story and one that has ideas to it. But then we're left with this movie that is a hodgepodge of ideas that never really make sense, characters that
Hmm.
we've never really thought of or seen, and direction that is just that plain, just times where it's incomprehensible. This movie is hard to understand in scenes.
Yeah.
And Tris, I is there anything that I said that you wanted to follow up on, or should we just jump into the movie now?
Um, I just want to say that I don't necessarily prefer the producer's cut. They're kind of on, it just depends on my mood which one I want to watch because I don't particularly like either.
Yeah, this isn't a good movie. Is like
No.
the biggest thing that I think people need to remember when we're talking about Halloween 6. This is not the case of a film being radically saved by a producer's cut. What essentially the producer's cut does is it takes an incomprehensible film and makes it slightly more comprehensible. And you understand maybe a few more of the decisions that are made. In the theatrical cut, things happen in this film that actually legitimately make no sense. Just like, and I'm not talking like logical sense. I mean, when you're watching it on film, you don't understand what's going on. This is some of the weirdest direction I've ever seen in the Halloween films. I will give it credit. It doesn't look like any other Halloween film. And that's kind of
Yeah.
where my credit stops. So, with that all said, I think it's time to jump into the last installment of this specific series. And let's jump into Halloween 6, which, as you mentioned, treats the character of Jamie, if you didn't even want to say dirty, it really takes this character in a radically different direction. And let me just say, Danielle Harris, who would be, I believe, 17 when this film is made, she wants to come back for this movie. She, by all accounts, is like doing everything that she can. She becomes emancipated from her family. That way she can
Yeah.
work the full hours under SAG law. And they don't end up bringing her back, so they bring in a new actress to play Jamie Lloyd, who is J.C. Brandy, who's only in the film for, I'd say, the first 10 to 15 minutes in it. And they don't even really explain that it's Jamie particularly well until like there's finally the name is said, and you're like, oh, that's Jamie Lloyd from that's Danielle Harris from 4 and 5, or that's supposed to be. What's your, because you're probably going to discuss it and summarize it better than I can. What's your issue with Jamie in this movie?
Um, the fact that her role in this story is so creepy and so weird. She becomes a she is raped, presumably by Michael, and gives birth to a sacrificial baby, or a baby that they're planning on sacrificing to Michael, and that is her entire role in this story.
Yes, until she gets killed off by Michael.
I mean, yeah.
And what's,
And
you mentioned something that I think is really important to discuss while we're talking about this film is just straight up. The Jamie character is so weirdly handled. This is again a theatrical versus producer's cut of this film. If you're watching the producer's cut, it is much more explicitly stated that Jamie and Michael, that this child that Michael's chasing the whole time is Michael's son,
Uh-huh.
through the surrogate, or not even the surrogate, through the mother of Jamie, implying incestuous relationships had happened or some form of a sexual assault has occurred off screen. Again, they never really say it, they never actually explicitly state that's what happens. You can just presume, based on her relationship with Michael, that it wasn't particularly consensual, especially when we get to the whole druid ritual cult thing going on. This movie starts off with Jamie Lloyd's being abducted the same time that Michael Myers is abducted by the Man in Black, which, again, for those who do not remember Halloween 5, which, how can you forget that film? He doesn't go to hell. Hell would not take him. But this is a film that takes place 6 years later. A now 15-year-old Jamie gives birth to a child, and a nurse helps Jamie escape with her child. Michael ends up killing the nurse. Jamie and the child flee with Michael on the pursuit. That's how the film starts off. And this is the case of you're watching a film that it's a little hard to understand what's wrong with the film at the beginning. I think you watch this opening scene. I describe this opening scene and take out all the shamanistic druid rituals that you want to. The idea of just Michael Myers chasing after this family sounds very in line with the Halloween films, right? I think you'd agree. That's a very
Yeah.
straightforward premise. What ends up happening, though, is just something is feeling off, and it starts off with the direction. The direction in this film is trying to model music videos of the 1990s, I think is the best way to put it. It's so quick slash cut. It has kind of this serial killer overtones to it, which weirdly enough, this film comes out, I think, a week after the movie Seven with Brad Pitt and Morgan Freeman comes out.
I I just watched that.
Yeah, and you can see the resemblance, weirdly enough. Like, if you were to tell me when I'm watching this film, I would have been like, oh, okay, this guy's clearly inspired by David Fincher's direction in films like Seven. That's not the case because David Fincher does not, like, he doesn't have time to see the Fincher's movie Seven. So, like, but that's what this direction feels most similar to. And maybe that's, again, this director borrowing from the aesthetic of Nine Inch Nails, which I believe David Fincher directs a few of their music videos. But just to put it, it is literally, and I don't know how to best display this on camera, everything's flashing. It's not as much cuts as it is either just like wild camera movements, lights just flashing on and off. And it's a gimmick that's used throughout the movie to increasingly worse effects.
Yeah. And it's pretty that's pretty much universally a problem in the theatrical cut.
Oh,
Um
yeah.
I wonder if the studio, because they showed this to a whole bunch of teenagers. That was their main demographic of people who did
Yeah, it's
the,
14-year-old boys, is what they said, was largely the audience.
and they basically turned it into something that that demographic would enjoy. These flashing cuts, these strobing lights,
That
the electronic soundtrack.
Yeah, they took the approach of grunge and put it into this movie. So it's everything of grunge in the 1990s, where 1980s is so stylistic, but in different ways, where it's a little bit shinier, where it's a little bit more fun, where it's a little bit
Hmm.
more vibing. And that's, I think, the tone that you can see, especially in Halloween 3 and 4, where it is just like, oh yeah, this is the 1980s. We have this over the top cartoony. The 1990s is like everything sucks. None of us are getting laid. Sex is bad. Like you got to reject all of it. And that's what Halloween 6 is kind of in that same vein of. Like this is the grunge movement where it's everything's got to look dirty, everything's got to be over violent, everything's got to just feel like I got to feel something while watching this movie because I feel nothing. I think that's probably the best way to describe the grunge movement. I feel nothing and I need this movie to excite me in the only way I know how to. And it's bad. It's just straight up bad when you're watching this
Yeah,
film.
it's not good.
And this is an issue of aging poorly, where it just straight up has aged poorly. It's also the issue of, if you are to take the approach of Fincher, of Nine Inch Nails, maybe two of the most influential artists to come out of the 1990s, you got to understand how Fincher directs a movie, where he's almost getting into the psychology of these characters, especially in Seven. I mean, you just saw the movie, right?
Yeah.
One of the most iconic scenes in the movie isn't even a scene technically with any of the actors. It's the opening credits where you have the song Closer by Nine Inch Nails playing, and you're in the mind of a serial killer. And he's employing a lot of the same stylistic tricks that Halloween 5 does. But the issue is for large sections of 7, we are following the serial killer. In Halloween 6, we never follow Michael Myers. So the same emotions that it's trying to manipulate out of us in this film, it doesn't work because we're not in that headspace. I think
No.
that's a fair way of describing it.
Yeah, we're in the headspace uh of
Paul
really
Rudd.
creepy Paul Rudd.
And this is Paul Rudd. In 1995, Paul Rudatius of Rudd, I believe is his middle name, Rudatius. I'm making that up. It's actually, this is when he's still going by the name Stephen. Paul Stephen Rudd is, I think, what he's technically credited as. Really interesting part for his career because this is the first film he ever stars in. And then the same year, he's in the film Clueless, which comes out before Halloween 5 or Halloween 6.
Thank
So,
God for him.
yeah. So this is, like I said, Halloween 6 is the film that starts his career. But luckily for his career, the audience knows him from Clueless first.
Uh-huh.
Had it come out the opposite way, I don't know if Paul Rudd becomes the biggest star in the world. One of the biggest stars in the world. He It's so interesting to think that those films came out in the same time because one of them feels like Paul Rudd fully developed into who we know Paul Rudd to be in the 21st century with his charm. If you want to call it shtick, you can call it shtick. But he knows who he is as a charismatic leading man. In
Uh-huh.
this movie, you wouldn't assume this guy has any acting range. I mean, he's quite literally horrible in this film.
I think we could probably uh blame the direction because we know that Paul Rudd's a good actor.
Yeah, and I think we can also fairly blame that they're not asking Paul Rudd to do what makes Paul Rudd. Like, Paul Rudd's not a funny character in this movie. He's devoid of
No.
any form of charm. He's just like, he's a guy who's kind of there just to be, almost weirdly enough, he feels like an inverse of Michael Myers in this film, where he's just Michael Myers without killing. He has the
Yeah.
same stalking tendencies. He's got this air of creepiness throughout, which I think is completely unintentional. But just everything this character does can kind of be described as creepy. And if you wanted to be generous to this film, you would say that that is done to show the trauma of a person who survives a killing attack from Michael Myers. Because, again, for those, in case you're not aware, Paul Rudd plays Tommy Doyle, who is the kid that Jamie babysits in the first Halloween movie. So this is him all grown up, or I think all grown up at the age of like 16 or 17, whatever it's supposed to be. And
Uh 8
I think it's 17, right? I don't know.
yeah.
I think
No,
it's
he's an adult.
he would be an adult, right? Because Jamie's supposed to be 15, but he's in high school in this movie. Is I thought what they say.
No, because he's living on his own.
No, he's living with his. He's living in not an orphanage. He's living in a what's it called? Uh, boarding
He's
house.
living with he's living where?
He's living in a boarding house run by that elderly woman, It's Mrs. Blank's ship.
What is a boarding house?
Boarding house. Would that be in the case of a boarding house is in which lodgers rent one or more rooms on a nightly basis and sometimes for extended periods of week. So
That
it's a.
doesn't sound like something a 17-year-old gets to do.
I don't know. Wait, I thought this is a great question. I really think
What
later
is
that night.
math?
Okay, hang on. Later that night, while Tommy meets Loomis at a Halloween party at a community college. Okay, so
Oh,
maybe
wait a
he's
minute.
community college age.
Wait a minute. We're assuming that he is like zero at in 1978. It's been 17 years, but he in the first movie he's already like
7 or 8.
yeah. So
So
yeah, he's
he's
like
in like
25.
okay, that's what I. That makes a little bit more sense, which is weird because I really thought this film was implying that he's a high schooler wrong, with Kara Strode.
She's in college.
She's in. Okay, so they're all college aged.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes way more sense. Like I said, this film doesn't ask any favors of Paul Rudd. Doesn't ask him to apply any of the skills he can because Paul Rudd, he's a charismatic guy and you know what he can do. And is that tone, does his Paul Rudd tone feel off for this movie? I would argue maybe it does, but you could see a world where they allow Paul Rudd to be more of his type of character actor and be in this film. I mean, look,
No.
3 years later, he'd be in Halloween H2O, and it wouldn't feel non-natural in that film.
It would feel natural in that film. It would not feel natural in this one.
Exactly, because this film doesn't ask him to be what H2O does. He's basically what I'm trying to say is Scream comes out, I believe, in 19. I think it's this year actually. I think Scream comes out earlier.
96.
Is it 96? Scream comes out in 1996. That's where Paul Rudd horror film fits more into the equation. That's
Yeah.
where you're like, oh yeah, that would be a Paul Rudd type character that you could see him playing. Like he could be in Scream 2 or
Yeah.
one of those types of movies. He doesn't fit in this movie. And again, this film asks him to do nothing except be this weird creeper stalker. Let's let's get back to the actual story of this movie.
Oh,
So
must we?
yeah, I think it's really important. There's a lot of just choices made in this. Uh, and this is me reading off the Wikipedia to kind of straighten up where the story is because there's so much of it. Dr. Loomis is living in a cabin outside of Haddonfield where he is met by one of his friends, Dr. Wynn, who tries to convince Loomis to get back into it with him and investigate what's going on. Right away, did you know Wynn was a bad guy?
I don't know. I have the issue of I saw all these as a kid, so I don't remember what my reactions were.
That's fair. When I saw this film, I instantly knew. I'm like, okay, we've never met this
Yeah.
character. He has to be the one that he's going to be somehow tied into this ritualistic cult.
Did did you see him being the man in black though?
No, that actually a little bit surprised me. One, because they didn't look alike to me.
Yeah.
Dr. Wynn just didn't look like the man in black, but apparently he is.
Also, Dr. Wynn is a character in the original Halloween.
Is he? Who is he in the
Y-
original? I mean, obviously it's Dr. Wynn, but
he's the doctor that Loomis is arguing with on, and that Loomis, you know that scene where they bring up the fact that he was driving?
yes, yeah.
That's the character he was talking to.
Oh, interesting. So they tried tying it back into this film. I did not know that. One of the aspects of this story that I just find so egregiously awful and very 90s is we hear what's going on in Haddonfield. They've banned Halloween, which is, I guess, this is like a footloose town where you can just ban something that I don't exactly understand how logically you would even go around banning something like that. But they ban Halloween, and this
I mean, they say that, but we like see them celebrating Halloween.
Exactly. It's kind of the footloose thing. How exactly do you ban dancing? Like you can't just like you just like ban it externally or not even externally, but you just ban it more to the uh uh sorry, I just got a text that I have to respond to in a second. But they ban it more in the idea of this town is not celebrating it. The most egregious 1990s aspect of this is let's talk about our boy DJ Barry Sims. Maybe one of the worst written characters in the Halloween franchise.
Yeah, he's up there with Tina and
Yeah,
Tina's friends from the last one.
yeah, this guy is essentially a shock jock who wants to
Uh-huh.
go. He wants to party with. He wants to party essentially with all these college kids. He's kind of like, let's bring back Halloween. He's very much the shock jock in the sense that he wants to like see what's going on. He wants to exploit the murders of Michael Myers and the whole legacy for his viewers. What's interesting is DJ Barry Sims was originally offered the role. The real radio host Howard Stern was offered this role, and Howard Stern turned it down, had no interest in taking part in this film. Probably a good choice. One, he seems a little
Yeah.
too old for this movie, and two, it would actually legitimately be like, he's not DJ Barry Sims, that's just Howard Stern, and it
Hmm.
wouldn't work in any particular meaningful way. But anyway, they this whole side situation's going on, and Michael catches up with Jamie, crashes in the truck, and kills her in the barn, and the child is nowhere to be found. There is this missing child, kind of think Mandalorian. There's a child that no one knows who or where they are. Uh, this scene of killing Jamie is like
Is
the least offensive murder that this film takes. It's pretty bloody, it's pretty violent, but it's not like explosively cartoonish.
I
Explosive
hate
being the
it.
key word.
I, I hate I hate the corn thresher kill just because this is Jamie Lloyd.
It feels not distasteful. It feels disrespectful to a character that's kind of helped build you. You build
Uh-huh.
your franchise, and it's not like the same level of Laurie Strode, where Laurie Strode gets killed off screen. I prefer Jamie Lloyd to die on screen, but that's like the
Yeah.
only positive I give this movie. She does die in this film to the hands of Michael Myers, and I guess that's technically a good story beat. But it's just like this role is so reduced to it, where I mean, she's literally on screen for 10 minutes, not played by the original actress, and she just dies. And I mean, her whole role in this movie is she's a plot device.
Uh-huh.
It feels uh, bad, but maybe just not as stupid as some of the next few kills we're going to be talking about in this film, too. Uh,
Yeah, not as stupid.
can we talk about the most baffling aspect of this movie? Or do you know what I'm about to say? The most baffling aspect of this movie. Can you guess what that is?
The Strodes moving into the Michael
Thank
Myers house.
you. Is that not the dumbest thing ever?
uh, yeah.
I mean, a good deal's a good deal. I get it. Like that is legitimately true. That is a if I'm correct, the abusive dad in this movie is the brother to the father of Michael Myers, correct?
No. The abusive dad in this movie is the brother of the man who adopts Lori.
Of the man who adopts Lori?
Yeah. So Laurie Strode's adoptive father. That's why she has the name Strode.
Oh, I see. Oh, okay, because that's right. They're not actually full siblings. They're. Wait. No, they're
No,
full
they
siblings.
are.
Hey, hang
The
on.
adoptive father. Adoptive.
Yeah, but the person who moves into this house, right,
That
is
is Laurie Strode's adoptive uncle.
Laurie Strode's adopted uncle who moves into this house, right?
Yeah.
But who owned the house originally? It was the Myers, right?
Yeah.
And they specifically say this character is his brother.
No, 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 no. So in the original movie, Laurie Strode's adoptive dad is trying to sell it
Laurie
because he's
Strode's
a realtor.
adoptive dad is trying to sell this movie in the 1978 version. Oh, that's right, because he's a real estate agent, so he's the guy trying to
Yeah,
sell the Myers house.
yeah.
Oh, I thought it was implying that that guy. I thought this movie was implying that Laurie Strode's dad lived in that house. Thus, it was actually uh, Michael Myers' dad. Okay, that makes more sense. So this is. It's not that this family lived in there. This is the guy who's trying to sell the house, and he sells it to his brother.
Yeah, it's the realtor is trying to sell this house, can't get anyone to buy it.
This is when I heard it. I'm like, I looked it up immediately. I'm like, wait, where are they living? Can I just say something maybe not profound, maybe not shocking? No one would live in this house. Just straight up in
Yeah.
Haddonfield, no one would live in this house. And specifically, nobody of the Strode family would live in the house. And the fact that everyone is not ridiculing this family in the neighborhood for living there is shocking.
The fact
Absolutely shocking.
the fact that only the dad knows that it is the Myers house out of everybody in his family.
How? This house is apparently infamous according to every other Halloween film.
Uh-huh. I
And
mean,
just
in the
like,
last movie it was a castle.
yeah, good point. It really, maybe that's what it was. Maybe they just didn't realize what house they were at. They're like, oh,
Sure.
we're living in a castle. Like the Myers murders happened at a castle. We're living in the normal house in the suburbs. Yeah, it's a weird creative decision where I'm like, they don't. You could just move them to a different house and it wouldn't actually affect it because none of the story really takes place in this house. But
Another Oh, go ahead.
it's to show that this dad's kind of a jerk and loser and idiot. But that's the only
Also,
thing. It's so dumb.
another weird choice is naming the dad and the mom of this family, Deborah and John, as in
Yeah,
John Carpenter and Deborah Hill.
yeah, I know. Pretty disrespectful to our boy John Carpenter here.
And Deborah Hill.
And Deborah Hill. It is at least that character comes off a little bit better than Johnny does in this movie.
Yeah.
Uh, I mean, when those characters finally get killed off on screen in really brutalist ways, I mean that's probably a pretty good metaphor for the Halloween series up to this point. Taking something that was once beloved and just killing them in the most grotesque, violent way ever. We get to this scene. Let's talk about Thorn. Can you? I know you are a man of great culture, of great religion, of great understanding, and I know you personally spent, I would say, approximately 5 months traveling the world in college to understand the Thorn religion. That was your.
What?
Yeah, that's why you were never at the dorm, right? Our freshman year, you were just walking out to go study Thornism, right?
No, I was with my ex.
The, and studying Thornism.
Sure.
Okay, so perfect. With all your inquiries, with all your knowledge and all your studies and research that I, of course, paid for on the Beniverse channel, what explain Thornism to us or Thorn to us?
Um, Basically, it is a constellation that appears in the sky every, or not every Halloween, but every random Halloween we decide to release a movie.
Yeah, very convenient.
Uh-huh. And every time the constellation is there, Michael is driven to kill.
Yeah,
And there's a lot more to it. And honestly, I've seen this movie countless times. I still don't really understand because I just don't care, you know?
yeah, yeah,
Uh, it's like they have to sacrifice a part of their family to appease the Lord of the Dead. I think,
It's some sort of, I don't know if it's necessarily the Lord of the Dead, but it's some sort of deity within the Thorn religion,
yeah,
is my understanding. So they have to kill a child basically every few years to appease it. And then can you explain the whole Michael Myers role within this religion?
he was, he could hear the voice that basically told him to kill.
Yeah, so he's like maybe not predestined, but chosen to be this kind of like artificial lamb that will, instead of being slaughtered, will slaughter. And that's
It's,
kind of like he's the one who has to basically kill the next uh, child, correct? That's my understanding of it.
yeah, he's like the soldier boy for this deity.
But also, isn't he just straight up? I, I, I'm trying to think. No, because he's not. He doesn't obviously kill. But Jamie is the, or not Jamie. What's Judith Myers is one of those sacrificial lambs, right?
Yeah.
He's one of the people. So he hears the whisper when he's a kid, and goes out to kill Judith Myers in the sacrificial uh, style to appease this deity. It's really convoluted. It's not
Hmm.
explained well in this movie, nor does it ever come back into any of the movies because they reboot it and just decide to, probably rightly, move away from it. It makes everything very convoluted. It takes out the idea that Michael Myers is a killer. It actually kind of makes Michael Myers almost sympathetic because you're like, this guy's just being possessed. He has no choice. He has no free will. He is just a entity to enact evil, but it's not like this person is evil himself. He's being possessed to be evil. It really takes a lot of the, by adding so much more mythicism to the series, it takes away all mysticism within this series.
Yeah.
It's
I wish it wasn't there.
it's really dumb. And it's like really convoluted to try to explain to anyone. I think we did as good of a job as we can explaining it, and I still think there's probably about 10 aspects of it that are missing. The one interesting thing that I don't think ends up even making it really into the producer's cut is the idea is Haddonfield is basically all in on this, right? They all know that this is what's happening and they've been lying about it, but they all secretly know that they worship this god, that they worship Thorn, and that Michael Myers is essentially doing their work for them. Thus, they don't get in the way. Uh, it draws a lot of questions to be had about the previous 5 Halloween films, if all the characters are just apparently in on it. But
Uh-huh.
I like the idea, I think, in theory, like this whole idea that, like, this is where it starts feeling like I said, a not even I've used the comp of an A24 film. I wouldn't necessarily call it this, but this feels more in line with the anthology idea that Michael Myers has for this
Yeah.
series, or not Michael Myers, that John Carpenter has for this series, where every year we learn something more. This would kind of be in. This would kind of be that story, like a very classic horror story of this is a possessed town full of people who worship this demon. And when somebody goes there, they find out the secret, and now they're running for their lives. That's a pretty classic horror trope. There's been a lot of movies. M. Night Shyamalan's done movies like that, but I mean, there's been much more than just that. That's what this movie, I think, wants to do, and then they lose interest in doing that, and then they just kind of reduce it even further in the theatrical version. It's kind of a mess. Can we talk about the Michael Myers in this film? Do you think it's time to talk Michael?
Sure.
Here's what I like about Michael in this film. I like the appearance. I actually think this mask is pretty good. It's
Yeah,
not
I
like
do
maybe
too.
my favorite, but it's not anywhere close to the worst. I think it's actually a pretty scary mask that fits the
Yeah,
character.
I agree with that.
it has a little bit more of like a serial killer look to it, I would say.
Hmm.
And this Michael, I would say there's actually some legitimate acting going on with Michael in this film. There's like scenes where it's almost like maybe it's accidental, where it almost feels like Michael is like learning basically his origins and like almost maybe not fighting against it, but like there's conflict in him at times. The kills are much more cartoonish, even for Michael. I mean, just straight up cartoonish. He electrocutes a guy. Michael's a little stinker in this movie. He's a little prankster. He's a guy that just like I like the water gag that he does, where he puts the body in the washing machine and then
Uh-huh.
electrocutes the father. That's a good
Uh-huh.
little gag gift that Michael does. I like I said, I like Michael Myers in this film. The issue is he's not the main antagonist of this film anymore. He's almost just like this own creature going out on his own journey. And he's the killing force of this movie. But ultimately, he is neither the guy that impacts the story largely because that's the Man in Black and the Colts. But he is just kind of there to just wreck stuff up whenever he appears. And I like the use of him in this movie. He should still be the main villain in this film, which is kind of a failure. Uh, but yeah, it has its ups and its downs, but ultimately I'm more positive on Michael in this movie than I have been in some of the other installments.
Yeah, I agree with you. Michael is, a- as far as sequels go, this is my favorite Michael so far.
Yeah, I would probably agree with that. Maybe Halloween 4 would be the only exception or
Well,
argument
it's the
for it.
same actor,
Hmm.
George P. Wilbur.
Yeah, so like I said, I think he's good in this film. I like what they're doing with this character. He's a little stinker doing his little pranks on people, going a little grotesque. The head explosions a lot, like
Yeah.
just straight up a lot. Uh, we get a bunch of Thorn of Colt stuff. Michael ends up killing the DJ guy, who's really annoying, and he kills in really brutal fashions in this way, where he again going back to this little prankster type thing of him. He wants to kind of excite people. Like he throws this guy in a tree. Paul Rudd looks up, and then there's this guy just like mutilated up in a tree, and he falls down, scaring everyone. I mean, classic Halloween prank. Uh, and he just keeps doing it over and over again. And again, if that's the movie, I like it. The issue is then we have to go back to the Man in Black. Can you
Uh-huh.
can you explain the Man in Black's role, because it does change I think a little drastically in whatever version you watch, where one of them feels more fleshed out, the other one is just like, oh, he's this leader guy.
In the producer's cut, he's the one that is basically like recruiting the kids, and he's
Mm-hmm.
kind of the head of the cult. The kids that will become the killers.
Yeah.
And in the theatrical, he's
He's that same thing but just less spoken.
it's less clear.
It's you're kind of confused what his role is. But basically we find out because basically Tommy Doyle is a, you could call him historian, but more likely conspiracy theorist on Michael. He's trying to find the truth about this guy. He uncovers a lot about the Thorn religion. And then he talks to the babysitter who used to babysit Michael Myers as a kid. They
Uh-huh.
have this whole conversation about it. We then find out that this is where the cult aspect of the film comes out, where we have Dr. Wynn and this babysitter and a bunch of the other town residents. They're all working in this Thorn cult. They're all doing it. And then they all get captured, and it leads to this scene where they're basically all imprisoned. And this is where the film gets like even weirder, because this is when we start noticing that the Thorns are doing scientific experiments. Basically, we see fetuses just in the
Well,
background. That's in the
that's in the
theatrical.
theatrical.
Yeah,
Yeah.
explain it in the producers.
And the producers, they're going to sacrifice Kara for some reason. I have no idea why, but she is set up to be sacrificed, um, along with Steven, the baby. And um,
Yeah, I.
Danny,
Mhm,
the kid, is also there. He might be the one that kills his mom.
mhm. Yeah, listen, it gets really dumb really quick and very, again, unmotivated. This is where the film just falls apart, where it's the ending of this. Like I said, in the theatrical cut, Karen notices fetuses from Wynn's failed experiences. And then there's this whole fight scene. Maybe the worst fight scene I've ever seen, like, filmed in a horror film. Like,
Yeah,
this is that idea where I talked about earlier, where it's just a bunch of flash cuts, a lot of just weird camera movements. It's literally strobe lighting to represent Michael Myers killing. That feels like a budgetary thing where they can't show it, so they just have to imply Michael Myers killing. And they're like, okay, each strobe light is supposed to be him stabbing. I think that's supposed to be the impact, along with the musical scores, that's implying that he's killing. It looks horrid. Horrid, horrid, horrid. And yeah, I mean, this film becomes just a straight up mess. Tommy injecting Michael with
with green shit.
yeah, it's called Coricives, and beats him unconscious with a lead pipe. I mean, that's probably one of the best approaches we've had to taking out Michael. Uh, they all escape, and Loomis goes back to enter. This is the theatrical cut. Loomis goes back to enter. He sees the mask lying on the lab floor, and we just hear a really muffled scream. And that's the end of the film for the theatrical cut. Very uninspired, very uninteresting. Producer's cut is more interesting. Can you explain the ending of the producer's cut?
So Paul Rudd's character Tommy has discovered that he can trap Michael in a circle of rooms when he says incorrectly Samhain.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Loomis goes back in, like in the theatrical, and finds that under Michael's mask is Dr. Wynn. And since, for some reason, since Loomis has entered the circle or touched the mask, it's not really clear. He gets the Curse of Thorn onto him, and while he's screaming in agony and in anger, we see that Michael is disguised as the Man in Black and walking away. We're assuming now in peace because he no longer has the Curse of Thorn on him.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how the producer's cut ends.
Yeah, it's a much more ambitious ending. I think I actually prefer this ending pretty heavily. It still doesn't even necessarily work because you're now just you can't fix something that is broken inherently within this
Yeah.
film, and that's what this film is. It's just broken inherently. However, the idea of Michael now being freed from it is actually a very interesting beat to be taken. The idea of, I mean, I think the best Halloween endings are always Loomis screaming his head off. Like I said, in the theatrical, they take that scream and they make it very ambient in the final frame, where you're just no, no, no. I have a feeling in the producer's cut, it's much more his normal type of screaming that we know him to be
It's
very
the
good at.
yeah, it's the same scream, but it's not as ambient.
Yeah, so like I said, I prefer this ending. I think it's probably the better ending, and at least this is where I talk about ambition versus laziness. This is an ambitious ending, even if it's not a great ending. The other one is just straight up, okay, we need to end this movie. We have to cut it. We have to work around the fact that Loomis isn't with us. Let's just kind of do this. Let's make a lot of just like strobe lighting. Let's have Tommy hit him with a pipe, and then let's just have the mask lying on the floor, which is a lame ending. Like, just definitively, you walking in, Loomis walking in and seeing the mask is just on the floor and him like yelling a little bit. That's just a bad ending.
Uh huh.
But yeah, those are that's the description of Halloween 6. We've talked about this movie. We've talked about the history of this movie at length. Let's just talk about one last thing in particular before we go off. I asked a question of you, Tris, earlier today.
Uh huh.
Which celebrity slash fictional character would be in let me find it. What celebrity slash fictional character would be participants in the Thorn cult? I said there's one
Uh,
right answer and there's a bunch of probably other right answers, but there's one that's a must.
I immediately said Ezra Miller.
Yeah, he's the one guy that he might be currently practicing Thornism.
Yeah. And then I also said the entire lineup of Warner Bros. Actors because they all seem to be cursed. So we got Johnny Depp, we got Amber Heard, we got um let's throw Michael
Ez-
Keaton in there because
Ezra
there's drama
Miller.
with that. Yeah, Ezra Miller. Um let's 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 throw in the Fantastic Beasts crew in there. Let's
Let's
throw
throw
in
in
JK let's throw in JK Rowling for flavor.
let's just throw
Uh
the whole DC cast that's not Black Adam, who is about to change the hierarchy of power in the DCU.
sure. So Ben Affleck,
Ben Affleck,
uh
Henry Cavill.
oh, I don't think he would.
I don't think he would, but let's just say it. Unfortunately, he might be cursed by Thorn with the fact that he
Ooh,
still hasn't
okay.
gotten a Man of Steel sequel.
Okay,
I like
fair.
this answer. I like the idea that somewhere in Warner Brothers, you have the executive standing over some runes and accidentally cursing every movie that they've ever made in the past 5 years that's supposed to be their biggest hit.
Yeah.
I like this idea. I'm trying to think. You hit it on the head. Ezra Miller is the one guy that is like so clearly, obviously into Thorn. I would say you'd have some other ones. I think I'm just gonna say it. I don't know why. Lindsay Lohan might be into Thorn. I think she's.
Is it because she's in the public light again?
Yeah, it's because she has that new movie coming out. I think that's how she had to make sacrifices to be in to get her movie to be on Netflix. So I'm going to say Lindsay Lohan. I'm going to say in terms of fictional characters, you just have to assume someone like oh god, who would be who's a Star Wars character who would be in Thorn? I'm going to say Yaddle. Yaddle and Kiadi Mundi are two characters that you could just totally see falling into Thornism. I'm going to just assume everyone who's a billionaire is in Thorn.
Uh-huh.
I think it's actually probably real. I think it's just something that we're not being told about. I think whatever this director's name, Chappelle, is trying to reveal something to us, and he sadly got silenced by making Halloween 6 The Curse of Michael Myers. And yeah, that's those are some of my answers. Ezra Miller's the correct answer. I just wanted to make sure when I texted you to make sure that you immediately thought the one person I thought when I asked the question. I'm like, what celebrities, like, if we just found out they were a part of the Michael Myers ritualistic cult from a movie that's not even canon, which celebrity would not shock you? I'm like, Ezra Miller.
Hmm.
It's him. With that said, we're done with the original series of Halloween films. Again, it's about
Woo.
to be rebooted in T minus 3 years. And is this your favorite iteration of Halloween?
No.
What's your favorite iteration? Or do you not watch
Oh,
any of
oh,
them?
you mean like favorite timeline?
Yeah, timeline.
Uh, I think I've got to give it to the new timeline, but we'll see after ends.
Yeah, I think. God, we're talking about new timelines and the fact that like so many of these are bad movies. I
Hmm.
think I didn't like Kills, but I really like the first Halloween film from 2018. So that's a
Yeah,
very
same.
favorable answer. We'll get to Rob Zombie. We will
Is
get to
Rob
Rob
Zombie your
Zombie.
favorite?
I don't think so, but like we'll get to him. I have a lot of
Okay.
positive thoughts about Rob Zombie. I
I
think
do too.
H2O has the ideas and then Resurrection blows it up. Maybe the worst that any Halloween movie has done.
Yeah.
And then I listen. I think by default, this is probably most people's favorite Halloween series, just for nostalgia reasons. This original six run is probably considered like these are the best. I don't know if I'd
Yeah.
necessarily go that far, but like I said, I think that's probably how most people view it. Where you have films that, because let's take it. First one's obviously a classic. A lot of people like Chew. Three is a cult favorite, so it definitely has its fans. A lot
And
of the
four,
general like Halloween audience likes four, and
yeah,
then
four
five
is
and
the
six
fan
are the
favorite.
Chew that they like can't do anything about. They're just bad films. But again, the producers cut has its fans. So I would
Yeah,
probably say that the first six is probably the most influential of the Halloween series. We'll get into it though with next time when we talk about this. We're talking Halloween H2O 20 years later, where we're going to discuss this, and then I'll be re-airing an episode of an interview that I had with Michael Myers himself, Chris Duran, on this next episode as well. So look forward to that. Thank you, roommate Tris, for joining me.
of course.
All right, buddy. And from the Beniverse, thank you for checking out this Halloween podcast where we talk the filmographies of Halloween and how they relate to the first film. Thank you for watching. My name is Ben Friedman. If you like this video, make sure to like and subscribe. Take care. Bye bye. Perfect. All right.